sure. Cut that bit.
Happy Hombrew Wednesday. Drinking my black IPA. It's a bit of a hop bomb, this one. And there's quite a lot of hop residue at the bottom. I think there's a little bit of diacetyl in as well. Just faintly I can smell it. However, Aidan from Baylands Brewery, he was over last night and he tasted it and he liked it. So win-win for me. It's always good when someone likes their beer. This was the beer that I brewed for the Brewers vs. Brewer. That was the competition where we had 6 brewmeisters lined up, and myself, Grant, Ian, Eugene, Elroy, Craig. We all brewed a beer, a different beer, at a beer festival. You would have seen that in a previous Hombrew Wednesday video. So this is the finished product we're going to get out and taste. Speaking of brewmeister, still here, and the Grainfather, I have done the brew comparison. It's videoed, it's recorded, the results are in. I just haven't finished editing up the video because there was a lot of footage, and I'm getting to it. Lots to do. I want to do this one right. So I want to make sure I've got all the shots that I need before I shoot this equipment back. So slowly sort of going through it all. The beer has finished fermenting, so it's just given it a bit of a diacetyl rest at the moment, and then we might be able to do a taste test and compare the taste of the two beers as well. Should be good. But yeah, bear with, the video is coming very soon. I'll get cracking and get it all put together and get it edited up. It's going to be really good. Really interesting results. I was actually quite surprised with the results, but yeah, you have to wait and see. Anyway, I'll leave you with that. Not much more has been happening in my Hombrew Wednesday week. Aidan popped over last night and we had a couple of beers. Chubby, we had your beer, so there's a following video with a little bit of a review of your beer. And on the end of this video, there's a little bit of Aidan having a chat about yeast, which is really interesting.
I've had it myself where you've had a really mint beer out of the fermenter, tasting wicked. You put it in, you do your sugar in the bottles and stuff, you do your secondary fermentation, you know, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later you pop a bottle and it's acetaldehyde, boom, green apples, Granny Smiths in your face. It's like...
So acetaldehyde is made from, the yeast produces acetaldehyde because that's a byproduct of the yeast. That's a precursor that the yeast makes so that it can propagate and continue working. So you're getting, when you get more acetaldehyde in a bottle conditioned beer than what you had when you first tasted it, it's not a product of the fermentation in the beer in the secondary. It's in the primary, when you're racking off, it hasn't had a chance to get rid of the acetaldehyde that's been left over.
Yeah, definitely. So it's definitely coming from the first part of your fermentation, so your first primary fermentation. The second part of your fermentation, you shouldn't really be getting any of those off flavours at all. It's actually not a very stressful exercise your beer is going through to do that secondary fermentation with the yeast that's in suspension. So it's definitely all those precursors are there in the first part of your beer from primary fermentation that have gone through to bottling before you've added that extra sugar and kicked off that secondary fermentation. Right. And that's generally because of some sort of yeast stress from early on in the first primary fermentation. So what homebrewers kind of definitely suffer from is they end up having like a higher gravity beer and they don't pitch the right amount of yeast in there. So they go, oh, no, I'm only using 1 packet of yeast because I only want to spend my $5 or $6. All of a sudden I've created a 1062, 1065 beer, just put my 1 packet of yeast in there, and it's like, that's just going to that's not going to work. That's going to screw your beer. It's straight away you're going to put that yeast in there. It's going to be under stress. It's going to throw all those off flavours. It's going to create all those, you know, acetaldehyde type, Granny Smith cider type off flavours straight away. You're never going to get rid of those. As soon as you put that yeast under stress, you know, your beer is history.
So the point of pitch, is what's going to carry you on everywhere else.
Absolutely. Right. So the yeast is probably the most important part of your beer. It doesn't matter if your malt profile is off, or you got the wrong malts in there, or you got the wrong hops in there. The yeast is what's going to make the beer. You know, if the yeast is not healthy and you don't have a healthy, strong fermentation, then you're going to have off flavours in your beer. Sure, if you don't have the right malt profile there, you're going to have some weird flavours from the malt, or you might have some weird flavours from the hops. But the yeast is what's going to give you the biggest technical flaws in your beer.
But a healthy fermentation, is that like within the next day having activity?
So yeah, I mean, you're going to have different lag times in yeast. So if you take a liquid yeast that you haven't made a starter for, then it potentially might be a little bit slower. Or if you're going to use a dried packet yeast that, you know, the varying ages, some could be 2 months old, some could be up to 12 months old, you might get like up to 24 hours lag time. You really should be looking at around 12 hours lag time. So after 12 hours, 12 to 24, you should definitely have some sort of positive pressure in the fermenter and have some sort of fermentation activity starting. If not, then probably the yeast health is probably not that good, or you've underpitched quite a bit as well, maybe. It just really depends. This is one of those things you learn as a brewer, whether, you know, realistically, as soon as you have an over 1058 beer, you're really and you're dealing with 20-23 litres, you're in two packet territory for dried yeast.
Yep.
If you're using liquid yeast and you haven't made a starter, then you're definitely in danger territory. Or, I mean, if you've got a liquid yeast, then you make a starter like a 1.5 litre starter, or a 1.8 or a 2 litre starter, and you grow it up, and you're pitching that into that beer, and it's, you know, 1062, 1065, then you're going to be fine. It's good, strong, healthy yeast. The cell count's already going to be up. It's already growing. And you're pitching it into that beer, and it's going to get in there, and it's going to find all the nice nutrients. And it's just going to go gangbusters, and you're going to, you know, within 12 hours, you're going to have a real good fermentation going on. So yeah, it's really, I mean, with yeast, the first stage that it goes through is growth. So, and to grow, it needs oxygen. So you really got to stir up that work, and you got to I mean, obviously, if you can pump pure oxygen into it, which is what a brewery does, that's the best thing you can do.
It's on my oxyacetylene, I took the oxygen tank off and I pump it straight in.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you can have an oxygen tank, but if you can't, then you've really got to really stir that up, and you've got to, when you're pouring your wort into the fermenter, you got a great height, get a huge amount of foam in there, and just really shake it up. But you really can't get the same amount of oxygen in there unless you're pumping pure oxygen in there. So do you pump pure oxygen at the brewery? Absolutely. So yeah, so as we're transferring from the kettle 100 degrees into the heat exchanger, as soon as it comes out of the heat exchanger, goes through past a carbonation stone, which is pumping oxygen straight in as on the way to the fermenter. So the beer or the wort going through to the fermenter is really oxygenated.
Yep.
And then we put the yeast in there, and then it gets in there and goes, woohoo, I'm just having a party here. So the whole sort of first 12-24 hours is just consuming all that oxygen,
propagating,
growing, propagating, and then it uses up all that oxygen, and it goes, right, now I'm going to start fermenting and start making alcohol, and that's where you create the beer. So, and that's where the biggest, I think, issue with homebrewers is they can't get that same level of oxygenation in there. You can just try and get it in there by shaking it up and pouring it in and stuff, but so the offset for that is put more yeast in, so you're getting more yeast in.
So anyway, cheers, and have yourself a night.